The stigma is real against early access games, and for a good reason. Do yourself a favor and go browse Steam's early access section for a bit. Me doing it now shows what I would expect from the App Store. A bunch of forgettable clones of something that already exists and was probably done better 5 games ago. Blatant asset flips and... is that a tower defense game? Only one title really stood out to me, a retirement home suicide simulator. And that says a lot about the state of early access. Steam has opened the floodgates as of late, which basically has given anybody with the ability to hit the compile button in their free engine platform of choice the ability to put out whatever abomination they can dream of, even if they don't have the proficiency to actually make it good. The entire concept of early access is kind of insane to me. You're literally giving someone money, sometimes half as much or even as much as full retail pricing, for something that's still being worked on and nowhere close to a finished state. You're paying for the privilege of beta testing, something you used to get for free, something you used to have to sign up for in order to get, and it was a big deal if you were selected to test in a beta. And that's where the inherent gamble of early access comes in. Sometimes you gamble and win. The game you got may be shaky, may have some performance issues, but you can at least join a server or load up the first level and play without a crash. Sometimes you gamble and lose, and you end up with games like, oh god. It's this lack of quality and overall questionable existence that's had me swear off early access a few years ago. I at this point have only paid for 2 early access games personally, Starbound and Playerunknown's Battlegrounds. I knew that Starbound was nowhere near done, but I bought it anyway because it had an interesting premise, and the content that was there on purchasing day was what I wanted to play. I didn't buy the game on the promise of future editions or mod support which didn't come until years later, or of some convoluted story only really hinted at to get me hooked wanting more. I just thought it was a cool space version of Terraria that I might like more than Terraria, and that was enough for me. I did my research, kept my expectations low, and ended up happy with my decision. It didn't bother me that after a handful of updates the game wasn't really touched for, almost a year. And then came along Battlegrounds. I broke my personal rule for early access for this game, being the first early access game I've bought since 2014, and second ever. I bought it without really doing the research I should have, slowly seeing more and more of it on Reddit and Twitter and everywhere I frequented. The thing that made me really consider it was one of my friends saying that he and another friend had just got it and had a blast. After some very basic research into how the game plays and what the point of it was, I was looking forward to having another co-op game to play with them, and I ended up purchasing it the next day. And that night, I had already gotten my money's worth of fun. Now I want to make this abundantly clear, if I haven't done so already, that early access is a huge gamble. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen friends or family buy something only to miss a small detail that makes their purchase completely regrettable. I've even had it happen to me, recently too, with my new camera. It overheats after anywhere from 3 to 25 minutes of video recording, solely because I'm not using a Sony branded proprietary memory stick, and I chose to use a 64 gig microSD I got for a third of the price of Sony's offering. Gambling is inherently risky, and with having a child now, money isn't something I can just personally throw around anywhere I want. But in this specific circumstance, the early access gamble paid off for me. Playerunknown's Battlegrounds, or just Battlegrounds, or, if you're a monster, PUBG, is a battle royale where you and optionally friends or a squad drop together off a plane flying over an island. When you land, your goal is to simply scavenge and survive. At most, there's 100 people in every game, all dropping in different spots they chose, and all with different equipment since all item placements are randomized. There have been some games where I drop in and find a sidearm, rifle, shotgun, armor, and accessories like scopes and suppressors in the first house I landed next to, only to have somebody in the next house right next to mine catch me off guard and kill me 30 seconds after the match starts. I've had games where I made it to the top 20 with nothing but a pistol, 20 rounds of ammo, and a metric ton of healing items. Some of the most fun I've had with this game is, oddly enough, playing solo. While playing in groups is insane fun, it's a different kind of fun, and I personally prefer the pacing of single play. It has the right balance between intense action and quiet reflection. It's also an interesting peek into how the meta of any given game can change your experience. Given unlimited resources and abilities, players will always take the path of least resistance. Whether that's sitting in a corner in shooting games or cutting across dirt tracks in Mario Kart. The dynamic, however, of everything in Battlegrounds being random, even as far down as the cosmetic items and locations of vehicles, it adds this layer of strategy to the game that doesn't really exist on paper. It turns into a psychological one-on-one duel with your opponent, outplaying them and outsmarting them to try to survive. There have been times where I'll see someone in a building and I'll fire a single warning shot at them, just enough to make them kind of freeze and build up a defense in the house, so I can maybe sneak around them on the backside and get away undetected. It's those minute-to-minute battles of the mind that I find the most fascinating in this game. The weapons themselves are pretty decently done as well. They straddle the line between easy to use and realistic, with things like iron sights being noticeably more difficult to use than red dots or scopes. Reloads aren't so quick that they're basically pointless, but they aren't so slow that if you miss both shotgun barrels you might as well just bend over and kiss your ass goodbye. The distribution of weapons and accessories can get a little irritating sometimes. I've had games where I've literally found 4 or 5 scopes in a row, and then I'll go 8 games in a row without finding a single freaking scope. But that's part of the charm of the game. You can never truly guarantee that you're going to get the good guns this round. And this one simple mechanic has so many implications for how the game plays out, it's staggering. It forces everyone to get good with every gun and not rely on 1 or 2 that they like. It forces playing smart and not forcing encounters you won't win. And it even leads into more psychological warfare planning, as you're much more likely to attempt to win via intimidation or taking a stealth approach than just pure brute force. That's not to say the game is flawless. Far from it. We are in early access after all. There's a rather jarring lack of polish on pretty much everything. Animations can be a bit clunky. Jumping over knee-high openings and walls can be weirdly frustrating. The pause menu is hard to navigate and doesn't have localized strings to hide the method names. The game itself kicks you back to the main menu after every round, causing unnecessary loading. And sometimes the servers just seem to route your matchmaking through Zimbabwe, making the game frustrating to play sometimes. There's a definite lack of feedback for some actions as well. Some people will just tell you to get good and figure out where the crack of gunfire is coming from, but sometimes you're in an area where it just reverberates all around you and you have no idea where you were shot from, or even how they saw you, or sometimes even just how you died. I'm not saying we have to have Call of Duty style damage indicators, but a kill cam would go a long way towards relieving some of the frustration from instant and sudden deaths. Like with every game nowadays, there's a laundry list of small issues I have, and if I hit every single bullet point of what I like about this game and what I don't like, we would be here for weeks. But that's kind of my point in a way. Battlegrounds isn't perfect, at all, by any stretch of the imagination. But I can say with absolute certainty that it is the best early access game that I have seen and played in a very long time. Early access is a gamble. Sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. Personally, I won, and I definitely got my money's worth here. But as with everything nowadays, there is a rather loud vocal minority on the internet that's already upset at simple things that should just be accepted with early access. Like the unpolished netcode and the kind of unintuitive inventory system when you're first starting. And on top of all of that, people are upset about Playerunknown's recent announcement that his earlier statement about the game being out of early access in 6 months tops is already being withdrawn, and that it's going to take a bit longer to polish up. Wow, geez, who didn't see that one coming? And if that statement bothers you, I have a simple question for you. Why did you buy an incomplete game that you weren't okay with in today's state?